Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chris Macpherson Show. We are ready to rip and tear into your sporting landscape. All the black and white, no grey opinions here. We're ready to get right into it. Lots to cover off around the sporting world. Of course, if you want to stay up to date with us throughout the week, you can stay tuned to our social media channels, Instagram, TikTok, X and Facebook at the Chris Mac Show. Lots of content going up there during the week. Different channels, different content. Stay across all four of them to stay up to date. Of course, you can see all of our YouTube videos on our YouTube channel as well. Lots of things dropping at the moment. We're working on some French Open content, keeping you up to date on a daily basis as well with Christian Montigan of The First Serve. But it is time to dig in and get around the grounds, and to do that today, I'm joined by Roundball Australia's Lachie Avil and our producer extraordinaire, JR Carter. Gentlemen, welcome back.
G'day, how's it going?
Afternoon, Chris.
Going very well. Good to have you back on. And JR, in honour of you being here, no drive-bys, but we're going to dig straight into the F1. I think my grandma could have driven at the pace of some of the lap speeds that we were seeing in Monaco. It was a farce.
It actually was. Like I went in with actually high hopes that the mandatory 2 stops was going to create some sort of action, and the likes of Williams and Mercedes sort of took that away immediately. The strategy of a teammate backing the pack up so that way the teammate ahead could get a free pit stop was just what's going on?
Lachie, it's just not in the spirit of the sport, is it?
It's not, but I think James Vowes was the team boss that they had on the radios for the broadcast throughout this weekend, and he put it quite well. He's just this. He said, "This is what the rules have created. You've brought in these mandatory 2 pit stops. You're at a track where this tactic is possible, and to boot, you've got 3 teams that have had both of their cars qualify very close to each other. So to allow this tactic as well, so." It was not a successful experiment, so I don't expect it'll be back, at least in its current form. I was a little bit excited going into it as well, thinking maybe it could just throw things around a little bit. But yeah, it didn't lead to a very entertaining race at the end of it.
Yeah, the good news coming out of this, though, is like the experiment, the reason behind the experiment, to a degree, and we'll see like how pronounced it is, to a degree won't be a problem next year as much. So the car's overall size shrinks down next year, and we may actually see like it be physically possible to overtake at Monaco again next year.
I think the positive to take out of this, because it's, you've got to try and find some sort of silver lining, and certainly it wasn't the racing on the weekend. But the positive to take out of this is that they are looking for a way to make some of these heritage tracks, some of these tracks that might be limited, they don't have the ability in Monaco. We know that, to expand the track. They're looking at options to try and make it more competitive. But JR, you talked about this when we were chatting off air. Christian Horner's coming out and, he's having these conversations that maybe we do need to continue to look at reducing the sizes of the cars to a point where this becomes a more feasible outcome on a number of the tracks. But we'll see what 2026 brings.
Yeah, Horner's comments were along those lines, as well as around just like minor changes to the track itself. Like we're heading towards swimming pool, you've got the option for a little bit more braking space there as well, where you can extend the track and like change that corner a little. Like while it will, it'll definitely like change the original heritage layout, it may make it more viable for some racing to occur in those spots.
Well, Lachie, that's kind of what you want when you're going to watch the F1, is a little bit of racing, not just a shopping cart procession.
Yeah, F1 is in a real battle for its identity in terms of staying true to its heritage in its 75th year, and also providing an entertaining sport that people wanted to watch. And we're seeing that with things like the cost cap coming in, and a lot of racing measures being introduced into the sport to provide competitive balance and actually good competitive racing. And unfortunately, the layout of Monaco, one of its most storied races, doesn't provide for that. So there has to be changes somewhere. I don't think anyone really wants Monaco to drop off the race calendar entirely, just because of the history that it does have. But people go into that weekend more excited about Saturday than Sunday, and that's probably a bit of an issue.
Yeah, it's a challenge, isn't it? Because, we see some of these wonderful tracks now, especially the ones that Carsten and Herman Tilke have designed around the world, that have created all of these beautiful pieces where there's, lots of great racing. And then we come to Monaco and it's, wonderful and it's all that heritage. But we need that balance, because, as you say, it can't just be about that shootout in qualifying and then we head to the race for a sheer procession. If that's the case, let's just have qualifying on the Saturday and not worry about Sunday, JR.
Yeah, look, and that's sort of where we're at. I would dread the day that we have a sprint weekend at Monaco too. Like where, like it may occur one of these days, but the biggest thing is the car size. Like we seen with the Formula E, they've been racing there. Like racing is possible as soon as you get the cars below, I think it's about 5 meters. Suddenly everything opens up. Whereas because we've got these just tanks of cars out there at the moment, they're too hard to they actually physically can't fit side by side in certain sections.
Well, it's certainly going to be a challenge for Monaco and the FIA to consider as we go forward. But for now, we'll turn our eyes and start to look further ahead as the F1 calendar continues its wonderful caravan around the world. But JR, I'm not sure. Are you going to jump out on us now, or are you hanging for a little longer?
Look, I'm going to just piff now, but I may appear. I see there's another Colapinto story, so I may be back.
There's an interesting prelude. Well, Lachie, let's move to basketball really quickly. And this one caught me by surprise. I think even those who aren't massive NBL fans would know the name Bryce Cotton. He's been synonymous with the Perth Wildcats. He announced that he was going to leave them. Everyone thought he was going to Japan. All of a sudden now he's signed on a long-term deal with their arch rivals, Adelaide, to play next season and for a number of years. This is huge news. One, for an Adelaide franchise that's been underperforming for a number of years, but two, for this rivalry.
Okay, you're going to have to explain to me, Chris, because there are a lot of very interesting sporting rivalries in the Australian landscape, but how does Perth and Adelaide, where does that come from? Because I'm not the most well-versed in NBL.
Realistically, they are the two westernmost teams. They are the two teams in the forgotten states. Basketball for a long time was an East Coast thing. And so they were kind of the unloved, children, the small market teams, if you will. And so there was a little bit of a chip on the shoulder. And so that became quite a rivalry, especially in the 80s and 90s. There were some players that transferred across both. Both teams had some dynasties in those periods. Adelaide hasn't had as much success in recent years, and so they've almost played little brother in that relationship. So you can imagine what this is going to add Perth. Cotton's won 5 MVPs at Perth. He's won a number of titles. He's been an 8-time NBL All-Star. He has absolutely, set the world on fire, and he had one of his best seasons last year, so hence the reason they thought he was going to go to Japan or somewhere else when he opted out of his Perth contract. But Adelaide have moved heaven and earth. They've got DJ Vasiljevic. They've got Isaac Humphries. This is a team that brought in an ex-NBA player last year in Montrezl Harrell. Like they're swinging for the fence. It hasn't quite worked yet, but if it doesn't work with Bryce Cotton, that's going to be the time that you know that there's something really wrong with the club. But for the time being, it's going to revitalise this rivalry that probably didn't have as much punch in recent times. And look, at the end of the day, Perth all the way over there, they've got a bit of a chip on their shoulder. We'll all remember when they wanted to have their own country basically during COVID. Going to get their ire up. They don't have a lot going on over there, I don't think, Lachie. Their soccer teams, they've got an NRL team, so maybe that'll distract them.
Yeah, maybe. Well, there you go. Look, in any sport, if you're going to have a big player, someone that's been a part of your club's history for so long, you say he's won, MVP for a number of years as well. Going over to a rival team is obviously a big no-no. So obviously stokes the rivalry and good on Adelaide to bring in a player of that quality, especially if he was expected to go overseas somewhere. It's got to be a pretty big coup.
It is a massive coup, and we'll wait and see how it plays out. Look, he is the best import in NBL history to this point. He could potentially overtake the great Andrew Gaze if he was able to drive. I'll get it there eventually. Like, he'd drive Adelaide to a title and get another MVP. He is right on the heels of Andrew Gaze for one of the greatest players in the NBL history. So we'll wait and see how that goes. But that rivalry will be fierce, and the first time he goes back to Perth, I'm sure he's going to get a less than friendly welcome. JR alluded to it before, Lachie. We're going to talk now about a Colapinto. Now, a lot of people think when we're talking Colapinto, we'd be going back to the F1 realms and, having a look at what's going on. But we're going to the world of surfing here. And one of the most stunning aerial moves one will ever see, Griffin Colapinto has absolutely ripped one out on the World Surf League Tour in our own Margaret River while we're bagging the West Australians. They've got some good things going on over there with some nice breaks. But just the amount of air and the way he lands it so smoothly, Lachie, it's absolutely phenomenal.
I was told this was a Colapinto story. I've popped back in and I've been let down. I'm going to leave you guys to it. We're going to continue talking about what appears to be surfing, but I'll leave you guys at it.
A little concerned, Lachie, about what sort of aerials he thought Colapinto was doing in his F1 car. But look, if he can land them like that, I might pay to see that too. Yeah,
the whole 360 get 4 wheels back on the ground, pretty impressive. No, but this was insane. Like, even, as someone who doesn't really know surfing, right, it always bewilders me when I see these clips. Like, how do you're in the ocean with water and makes things slippery. I don't know how you are able to do those kind of turns and keep the board sticking to your feet and then land in the water with such control. It's pretty incredible. And I don't know, it's just one of those moments. Surfing is one of those sports, right? You kind of see the highlight clips come around every once in a while and you go, oh, that's really cool. So, yeah, great turn.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of stuff that knocks on the door of these pieces at a high level regularly, but, occasionally there's one that cuts through into the day-to-day zeitgeist of it. And, this is obviously one of those. Absolutely phenomenal. Speaking of people that can cut through into the zeitgeist, Lachie, Nick Kyrgios is back. He had a wild card for the French Open, but again, another injury for Nick. Is his career done? From a results point of view, it obviously has been, not on the radar for a long time, but he can't even get himself healthy. He's been offered a couple of wild cards over the recent times, but, he was going to, play in the doubles here and he just can't play. He's supposed to be playing Wimbledon. This knee injury is a real concern, and I just don't know even if he can get back out in the court, whether he's actually going to be a shadow of himself even.
No, well, obviously our mutual friend Christian Monaghan can speak to this topic and Nick's history a little bit better. But from what I understand of it, his body's been done for a little while. Obviously, the knee has been giving him some strife. I think his wrist is pretty messed up as well. That's probably, obviously, as a tennis player, that's a really crucial one. If you don't have the proper strength and the flexion and the ability to get power from that part of your body, then it makes it very hard to be a competitive tennis player. So, is his career done? No, probably. He'll still play professional tennis events, and he's a great entertainer, whatever you might think of him. I know he can appear a little bit sooky at times, and I don't disagree with that opinion, but there is no arguing that he draws a crowd and he brings a lot of attention to the sport of tennis. So I'm sure he'll continue to play, but unfortunately his days of winning Grand Slam doubles titles and at least making pretty decent tilts at the singles trophy as well is probably behind him.
Yeah, it'd be surprising to see him really charge back to those depths and those glories again. But as you say, all publicity is good publicity, and it's certainly something that he does deliver in spades. Before we wrap around the grounds, we're going to head to something a little bit different. I don't know whether we've really talked horse racing before, Lachie, but this one's quite a big story up here in New South Wales. Rosehill Racecourse, one of the premier race courses, was proposed to be sold off to the New South Wales government. It was all sort of set, although there was a lot of questions asked about whether the offered price was also the accepted price by the government. It went to a vote this week, and what looked like a fait accompli after Racing New South Wales had guaranteed the money would be used to be invested in upgrades in other tracks like Warwick Farm to bring them up to Group 1 standards. It has been voted down this week by the members, despite the fact that they were offered all sorts of wonderful deals, including $1,000 bar tab a year for 5 years, every member, and 5 years of free membership. Even that didn't get them across the line, Lachie. They voted with their feet and not with their wallets. And Rosehill Racecourse will stay. It'll be interesting to see what that means from an investment point of view, but it's going to be a big hit to the government's housing plans in that sort of Parramatta, Western Sydney region.
Wow, free beer for a few years. That sounds like a pretty good deal. Just the convenience of that, it'd be pretty nice. Look, if that's a big story, I'll take your word for it. Haven't heard about it down here, but racehorsing is, horse racing, I should probably put it that way, is, it's one of those sports that's kind of drifted away over the recent years and, yeah, obviously occupy a lot of land. You could probably throw golf into that kind of what do we do with this big paddock of land? Is it worth keeping it around or do we turn it into something else? And I guess we're kind of in that phase with Rosehill as well.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see what now happens and how they invest and continue to try and grow the footprint of racing. As you say, it is diminishing, and you probably hit the heartstrings of our Sydney residents because there's currently still a fight on for one of the inner city golf courses at Moore Park, right near the SCG, that's under threat from Clover Moore and some of the left-leaning politicians. But anyway, we won't dig into that today. We don't need to, we've gone as close to politics as I think we need, Lachie. So on that note, it might be time to take a step back, take a deep breath, refocus on some sport, and I might catch you later in the show with your absolute expertise on the round ball areas.
Sounds good.
Well, it's now time to dig into some rugby league, and of course, at this time of the year, what else would we be talking but State of Origin off the back of that enthralling game one, some might call it if you're wearing a blue jersey, but there's lots that will say otherwise. Matt Willoughby joins us again, our internal rugby league expert. And Matty, look, there'll be plenty of happy Blues fans today, but I'm not sure that there'll be too many rugby league purists speaking the virtues of that game as a spectacle.
Yeah, they're certainly not going to put that one in the Louvre, are they? Thanks for having me again, Chris. It was a real strange game. It sort of never really reached any heights. New South Wales had the forward dominance for so long through the start of the game, and obviously there was a lot of missed goal kicks, but really they were poor in the second half as well, and it turned into just a bit of a rubble. Well-deserved winners, but I think New South Wales have got a lot of improvement, and that should worry Queenslanders for sure.
Yeah, it certainly. And Billy Slater, his post-game press conference, I think the best word to sum up Billy Slater was very flat. He looked, a little bit, I think, perplexed that they were so outplayed by a side that didn't play well. Does it mean back to the drawing board for Queensland? We know they love that pick and stick mentality. It feels like they should make some changes, but do you think they will?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. After last year's series, where they got humbled really in the end. And I sort of thought Billy would come back bigger and stronger and really find his mettle. And then they sort of did a good pre-game. They kept everything quiet. They sort of got under the radar, and you really thought they were going to come with a real solid plan and good foundation. But it seemed a bit like more of the same last night. I personally think that DCE's probably time has passed, but as we saw with the women's team, Ali Brigginshaw, she barely touched the ball in the women's origin, and she won't get dropped. So they're 1,000,000 to drop DCE, but I think Dearden made quite a difference when he came on, and I think him and Munster are probably the halves that they need to get out of this mess.
Yeah, I agree that DCE looks like he needs to move on. As you say, they're loyal literally to a fault, the Queenslanders, and we've seen that. It undid them in the women's, as you said, and it could be the undoing of them in the men's. I have a feeling that they'll stick with DCE, and then maybe if New South Wales win game 2, we might see some changes rung for game 3. In terms of, and we'll talk about this off air, the makeup of that Queensland bench, you feel that they might have been missing. I know I was, and again, I'm a bit one-eyed with the Raiders, and I was quite happy he didn't get picked from a club point of view, but you feel Corey Horsburgh might be able to add some impact to that bench, that aggression that he could bring?
Yeah, 100%. I think they missed him big time. I think he really could have made an impact coming in after sort of 25, 30 minutes. I thought Lindsay Collins was okay. I thought, he did his job. He ran strong. The two that sort of seem strange for me are both for Moore and Trent Liero. I think they're sort of quite similar players. I don't really like Liero that much. He was on the fringe of giving away actually a sin bin, I thought, towards the middle of that second half. They definitely need Beau Fermor, and I think, they definitely need Corey Horsburgh in. And I think Kurt Mann would add something if he was in the 17 as well, just around the rucks and sniping away a bit more. I think those two blokes probably offer more than Fermor and Liero.
Yeah, look, I personally suggested it to a few friends this morning when we've been talking post-game, as you do in those conversations in the debrief, that I'd actually love to see Dearden go into that 7 role and bring Kurt Mann into the 14. I mean, he's so versatile. He can even play on an edge for you if you need to. I think Beau Fermor, what we've seen from him at club level, I don't mind him being in there, but as you say, you can't have him and Liero. It's a really weird mix. I think there's some other players, though, that have got to find themselves under pressure. I think, Kalen Ponga we've talked about before, and we talked with Adam Martin about him as well. He's probably only there because of the Reece Walsh injuries, but I don't know if they've got a better solution at fullback than Kalen Ponga at the moment.
Yeah, Kalen, he tried hard, and he was all over the place, and he was certainly not lacking effort, but it didn't seem to have a lot of smarts about what he was trying to do. It was all a bit like under 9 sort of thing, get the ball and then see where we can get to. Made a few errors. In saying that, I'm not sure that there's a better option out there at the moment. I think one of the areas they really need to clean up is that Valentine Holmes isn't a winger. He got sort of shown up both defensively and with the kicks last night. Funnily enough, I thought Val had reached his use-by date at the end of last year, but I sort of do enjoy the way St George are using him. They're really getting his pace to an advantage on the outside of some men, and he's really running really good lines. So I actually think if he is in the team, it's got to be in the centres, otherwise he's not in the team. They really need, and I'm not sure the exact placement with injuries for who just lost me for a sec. The 2 wingers who could come in, the Broncos winger, name just escapes me.
Go on Cobbo? Is that who we're thinking?
Cobbo, yeah. I'm not sure what the time frame is with Cobbo, but they really need some more strike like him on the bench, on the wing, than Valentine Holmes.
So on that, if you then move Holmes to the centres, what were your takeaways from Toya's debut? Obviously, that magnificent flick pass that did set up their one try, but I think he was probably in a hard place to go and absolutely thrive in terms of that whole team unit.
Yeah, I thought he played well. I thought he didn't make any errors. He did his job. He would have been aiming to get in there and make his runs and make his tackles and not make too many errors. There was a few little defensive reads that probably were astray, and because they haven't played together, possibly a bit of a trust issue between him and the winger. But I thought he played well, and I thought he's shown that he's possibly going to play quite a few Origins in the future. But it could come down to him and Val Holmes for that centre spot if they get Cobbo back.
Yeah, interesting. I also noted that Brian Toto try, Latrell, the catch and pass, and you could see Xavier Coates just shot in. It was, instinctive. Maybe it was lack of communication. Maybe it was that he didn't have that full trust in young Toya. But, I thought he executed himself reasonably well considering. The one last thing I want to ask you before we move on to a final topic, Matt, the sin for Brian Toto. It was a tough one, but I think by the letter of the law, it probably had to be the way it was.
Yeah, I didn't have too much of a problem with it. I do agree with the commentary that they slow these things down so far that it looks worse than it is in real time. But yeah, it wasn't something that I really had an issue with. I thought either way, I certainly wasn't thinking that it was a huge problem.
Well, let's have a look at how things pan out. Obviously, Billy Slater summed it up best in terms of when people started asking about selection. Players have got to get through the next couple of weeks of club games before they can worry about anything, because he can have things in his mind, as could Laurie Daly in terms of his selections and injuries and suspensions and all these sorts of wonderful things. So we'll wait and see how the next couple of weeks play out and how these players back up coming into this round. The other piece, obviously, that's all over the headlines at the moment, and I touched on this, I did a LinkedIn post on it the other day, is around this whole Lachie Galvin to the Bulldogs mid-season. It just seems, and we talked about Kurt Mann before, it just seems if you're Toby Sexton or Kurt Mann, you've got to be questioning what else you could be doing if they're going to try and bring him straight into that NRL side. I mean, they're paying him a lot of money, way too much money to be playing him in New South Wales Cup if the numbers are to be believed for Lachie Galvin. He's also a 6, he's not a 7. I just don't see how they do it. Everyone's been performing so well there. Someone's going to miss out if he comes in, and it just seems like it could really eat away at the Dogs' culture and be a real risk factor.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what you're saying there. In actual fact, I actually think it could be a huge issue for the Dogs. They seem to be so built around culture and a real strong team mentality, and they all play for each other. They all get around each other. They all seem really close and tight, and I think this could derail them quite a bit. It's sort of funny with Lachie. He's obviously a good kid, and I do feel sorry for him, but I think he's been pretty badly led here by his management team. He's kind of on a hide into nothing right now, because the Dogs are in first place, and whilst they probably haven't had the best last month that they'd want to be having, they haven't really won a first half for a while. It could be a little false, their position on the table, and they might actually fall away a little bit towards the back end of the season. So he's on a hide into nothing that if they fell out of the 4 or if they went out in straight sets in the final, then people are going to be looking at what happened at this period of time and sort of going back. He's going to be it's going to take him a while to remove that stigma that, there's a lot going on. It's all a bit of a circus around him. I actually think the Tigers will be better off in the next couple of weeks without that circus altogether, and they can just move on and start preparing for the rest of their season. And I actually think it'll put them in a very good place, because it just derails the whole culture of the team.
It certainly does, and I've tried to play this out about a dozen different ways. Like when you look at it realistically, Galvin's if he's going to go into that side, he's going to play 6, 13 or 14. I actually think the Lachie Galvin in the long run will actually be a really good ball playing 13, potentially for the Bulldogs. I'm not sure where they end up seeing him, but they seem to be his natural positions. But you look at Bailey Hayward's been so good, Kurt Mann's been good for them. Obviously Matt Burton at 6, and yes, people have said you can reshuffle him to the centres, but you got Stephen Crichton and Bronson Xerri. You then start reshuffling, and you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like Crichton can play fullback, we know that, but then Connor Tracy's been outstanding for them too. So it's one of those things of, 18 into 17 doesn't fit and someone misses out, as you say, it starts to disrupt it. You hope that it doesn't, because it's been a great story after the really tough run the Bulldogs have had in recent years up until last year. But you feel that there's going to be something, and the Bulldogs fan, as you say, even if they slip to fifth now and finished and they go straight into elimination finals football at the end of the regular season, there's going to be Bulldogs fans saying, well, why have we done this? Basically now, unless they go and make a grand final, Lachie Galvin's going to be, the one who's probably going to have the feedback and the poor rap on his shoulders.
And you don't want to get offside with the Bulldogs fans, I wouldn't have thought. They're pretty unforgiving. Yeah, the thing I also heard is maybe Connor Tracy misses out and they move either Crichton or Burton back to fullback. But to me, Connor Tracy looks like one of the players that, he's probably a bit even more integral than Sexton. I think all the players get around him. They love the effort that he provides. They love what the one percenters that he does. And yeah, your bench is exactly right. Like Bailey Hayward, I think he's one of the most underrated players in the game. I watch him live. If you go to a game and watch him live, the amount of work he puts in off the ball when he comes in, he really has an impact. So it's a puzzle. Maybe an injury is the thing that'll save him. If they had an injury and then were forced to do a few things, that's probably, I honestly think he should do a couple of weeks in New South Wales Cup and then see where they go from there. But it seems a strange one to do that.
Yeah, well, only time will tell. Cameron Ciraldo with one of the most expensive roster problems in the NRL at the moment. We'll wait and see how it all plays out. Interestingly enough, they do play the other side this week, I think, in the next game up against Parramatta. The game where he'd come in, which would be interesting to see how that'd shape up, because obviously they were the two clubs bidding for Galvin, but we'll wait and see, Matty.
Yeah, that would be a good, interesting game. And yeah, I'll be very keen to see the team list next Tuesday to see if he finds his spot anyway.
Well, as always, Matty, a big thank you. Look forward to catching up with you again in a couple of weeks, talk some more rugby league as we sniff about around either side of Origin too.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Chris. I'll talk to you soon.
Well, it's now time to move into the round ball action, and very fittingly, almost the word, we bring in Round Ball Australia's Lachie Avil, our expert on all things football or soccer, depending on your slant on the pronunciation. Lachie, good to have you on, and you're proudly rocking those colours, which I'm sure we'll get to in a moment.
Yes, thank you. I thought just for the very special occasion, it's been a big week for the Arsenal Football Club, so repping the colours proudly.
Well, while we're talking big weeks, another person, from your neck of the woods, downtown Melbourne, who's been a very big week for is none other than Ange Postecoglou, the head coach at Spurs, who delivered a succulent European trophy. I think at this point, if you're a Spurs fan, any trophy would be nice, but it's been a tough year in the league, but winning the Europa League.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm not sure if the word succulent was thrown around too much in North London over the past week or so, but what an extraordinary achievement. Absolutely rubbish game of football, must be said, but that's not what this was about. It was about Ange delivering on a promise. It was about becoming the first Australian manager to first coach in and then win a European final on the men's side of things, I should say. But it's amazing. All the adversity he's had to fight through, just the different levels of football that he's climbed up. Obviously won championships at South Melbourne as a player and as a manager as well, and had to go through the ranks of Australian football in a country where soccer is not the primary sport, obviously. Very much considered a tier 2 sport at the moment, and he's risen up and he got the national team gig through his efforts with the Brisbane Roar and Melbourne Victory as well. And then obviously gone to Yokohama Celtic and now Tottenham and had success in that second season wherever he's gone. And that quote, which I firmly believe was completely unintentional and maybe just a slight misuse in grammar on Ange's part, which got misconstrued to the end of the world, is now looked back upon as one of the hardest quotes in football history. So it's a massive, massive moment, and we'll talk about some other European successes from Australians as well this week. But Ange to cap it all off and go win a trophy, hopefully save his job and get Tottenham into Champions League football next year is very, very special.
Certainly is very special, and obviously breaks that drought for Tottenham as well. And as you say, he made that quote some time ago, and you feel like it was almost a grammatical stumble, because what he was saying, and he's referenced back to this a number of times, is factually he has won a trophy in his second year in each of the gigs that he's had. So to that point, he had always won one. He wasn't predicting and outrageously, and then I think he's just lent into it as it's got deeper and deeper into this Europa League. On that note, in typical Ange fashion, while he tried to sit back in some of the celebrations, he got put front and centre and then rolled out another quote, Lachie, talking about how the third season's always better than the second season in TV shows. So are we hinting at something there, do you think?
Well, that massively depends on whatever his conversations with Daniel Levy would have been in the day or so before that moment. This is obviously at the Tottenham Trophy Parade where they're celebrating with all their supporters back in London. And he said to them as he was on the microphone speaking to tens of thousands of people, all the best TV shows in the world, season 3 is always better than season 2, which was met by a loud applause from the fans and the players alike. If this happens before he had any clarity on his future, then it is clearly saying a message to Daniel Levy in a cryptic way that probably is just brushed off by some crowd rousing by many. But if it's come after some certainty that's come from Daniel Levy that he will be at the helm, well, then it is a very inspiring address to really kick on next season and have a go with the league, hopefully with a few less major injuries to deal with throughout. And in the top European competition, obviously, he's had a couple of goes with Celtic to not much avail. But Tottenham is a different beast. He's got a much better squad, a new league phase, which is slightly more forgiving for him. So he should absolutely make the knockouts if he's there next year and hopefully have a go throughout the round of 16 onwards in Europe's top competition.
Yeah, we'll wait and see. I did like his little caveat quote that he quipped before the Brighton game when he sort of talked about that other quote that he'd made about the third season and said I should have thought about it a bit more there because often enough in the third season they kill off the main character. And I love that he got the word strife into a quote as well, which is very, very Aussie Ange. But yeah, we'll wait and see. I'm sure that story's going to develop. Well, we know it'll develop one way or the other. There'll be something announced at some point in the coming weeks around what happens next season for Tottenham. And maybe Ange can take it on, or if not, I'm sure there'll be some other clubs in other leagues that'd be interested in signing him on a 2-year deal at least so that he can bring them a trophy.
Yeah, absolutely. And one just thing to leave you on for next season is that the final of the Champions League will be played at none other than Puskás Arena, which for fans of Australian football will know Francis Puskás was a coach at South Melbourne when Ange was playing there, and it was somewhat of a mentor to him. So it's one of those other special moments. You can see the story just starting to write itself next season. Ange was asked about it. He said, yeah, let's dream on. Why not? So can't wait. Despite the colours I'm wearing on every but 2 days of the year when we face them in a North London derby, I'm full on Ange.
Yeah, I like that. You're cheering for Ange, not for Tottenham. Speaking of the colours you're wearing, the Aussie crew at Arsenal got it done in the women's competitions as well, mate. So I'm sure you were up in the bright and early hours recently watching that. Give us a bit of a recap of what that means. And you know, some of those Aussie players are involved. Obviously, there's a really heavy Aussie influence in the Arsenal women's squad.
Yeah, thankfully it wasn't too bad. It was a 2 a.m. kickoff. So in terms of the decision of to stay up or to, wake up early, it's a pretty easy one. But yeah, it's incredible. Arsenal becoming the champions of Europe for the first time in a little while for them. And obviously for us 3 Australians involved, Kyra Cooney-Cross, Caitlin Ford and Steph Catley, who was hands down the most influential of the 3, played a very good game at centre-back for them. She's been going a little bit between left back and centre back for the Tillies and for Arsenal as well, but she was exceptional and they bring home a European trophy, and the list of Australians who have won the Champions League as a player almost doubles from 4 to 7. So obviously in the women's side of things, we have Ellie Carpenter, who's won it twice, the only Australian to do so, and Harry Kewell is the biggest headline on the men's side of things as well. But to have someone so involved in the final the way especially Steph Catley was kind of brings a new kind of shine to it. So a really proud moment again for Australian football and caps off probably what has to be the best 7 days for Australia in European club football. So yeah, really, really cool that we've got a lot of our Matildas involved. And of course, they're on home grounds this Friday and Monday as well to play some more friendlies. So hopefully they can kick on in the national team as well.
Yeah, hopefully they can bring that back in those games against Argentina certainly looking forward to those as well, and we'll have a bit of a breakdown of those undoubtedly next week when we get back together. Before we do move on from European football, would be remiss of us not to at least mention the terrible scenes that we saw early this week when Liverpool's trophy celebration was interrupted and impacted by a van crashing into a number of pedestrians and fans celebrating. Again, we don't know a lot at this stage when we're recording. We're still sort of within 24 hours of the incident, but our thoughts are with everyone there. And, we understand at this stage there's no demonstration of malicious intent, that it looks like it might have been just a car accident, Lachie. So we hope that everyone recovers. Quite a number of people in hospital. It's pretty horrific scenes when you see some of the pictures. So, again, our thoughts are with those people.
Yeah, of course. I think waking up this morning and seeing this news, and I'm sure this was a reaction of a lot of football people when they discovered what had happened, is straight away for a club like Liverpool, you're thinking about the Hillsborough disaster and the toll that caused on their community, and the famous song that they sing, You'll Never Walk Alone, and the impact that message has on a football club that has been marked with a lot of tragedy over the years. And unfortunately, this is another step in that. As you say, we don't really have a lot of information on exactly what has happened. So far, from what I've heard, is that there have been a few serious injuries and that paramedics were quick on the scene. Obviously, there was a lot of security and medical staff around. I haven't heard that anyone has passed away, thankfully, as of yet. So hopefully that stays the case. But really unfortunate, of course, incident for what was supposed to be a day for celebration.
Yeah, celebration turned panic and chaos, unfortunately. It's hard to really segue or transition from that, but we will move forward and move to continental football closer to home. And it looked for moments that Melbourne City had done enough to take out the Asian Champions League women's final, but unfortunately they fell just short. The game went to extra time, couldn't be separated then either, and then it went down to penalties, and it was 5-4 on penalties, Wuhan taking out the title on their home soil. So near but so far, but a stunning achievement for Melbourne City's women.
Yeah, the way they lost this game was really brutal. They had a 1-0 lead going into the final moments of the game. They scored a second goal to take themselves 2-0 up, which was unfortunately ruled out by VAR. They have VAR in the final of this competition, which is not something that we've seen a lot in women's Asian football. And then they go down the other end and Wuhan appeal for a penalty. It's initially waved away before VAR then intervenes again and awards the penalty to Wuhan, which they scored to take it to extra time and then to penalties as well. So you look back at the replay, for at least in my opinion, both correctly overturned by VAR. So the decisions I have no issue with, but it must be brutal for Michael Matriciani to see the video referee have the impact on this game and take this continental crown away from them, knowing that they could have used a little bit of VAR in the A-League women's semi-finals a couple of weeks ago that kicked them out of that competition. So it's just a cruel twist of fate from a side that was on the cusp of some really special history. They were on track for 3 trophies and they've been brutally robbed of 2 of them. Sorry, I shouldn't say robbed of one of them probably, but it's been taken away from them. And it's really close way on 2 occasions, so they'll have to settle for 1 trophy, but the one that they did earns them qualification into the Champions League next year, so they have a chance to do it all over again.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll be eyeing off that opportunity, and as you say, a beautiful run to get to that point. We remember that quarter-final at home, taking down Taichung Blue Whale, and they're over there, had that semi-final, tough semi-final win over Incheon Red Angels to get them to the final, and then again playing Wuhan in Wuhan, which was, an extra added challenge and to go so deep and so near but so far. And as you say, that very bittersweet irony around the VAR piece, I'm sure stings a little for Melbourne City and their fans. But again, I think the overarching message is well done on a phenomenal season where essentially it came down to a couple of clutch momentary moments. We know the piece with the Central Coast game the other week, and we touched on that last week. But a wonderful season for Melbourne City nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. They have to be very proud of what they've achieved going on. And undefeated regular season is something that shouldn't be shied away from, especially at the 22-game length of this season compared to some of their other undefeated seasons. This one is clearly the most impressive. And yeah, they fell desperately short of a grand final again and lost a game that they probably shouldn't have. You think of the the head loss of the red card as well early in that second leg. That, if that wasn't the case, then they probably would have taken the game out of the reach of VAR to intervene and a refereeing decision to intervene and take it away from them. So it's really disappointing. They're going to feel this for a little while, but they are one of the best structured and have the best fundamentals of most A-League women's clubs. So I've no doubt they'll be back.
Yeah, those structures will set them for success. I'm sure they'll be looking to go a little better in both those competitions next year, and we'll watch on with bated breath as they take those on. Speaking of teams taking things on, Melbourne Victory took on Lachie's challenge of two-legged semi-finals, and the fact that they're a farce and they shouldn't happen. And I just love that this is so ironic, Lachie, because I'm sure that you're pumped that your team's now through to the grand final.
I'm absolutely pumped they're through to the grand final, and I'd make the argument that this game would have been just as exciting if there wasn't a first leg involved as well. If we started this at 0-0 and Victory push hard for a winner and then a closer in the second half, I don't see how this is any less exciting, Chris, than coming in with a 1-0 deficit. I think they were still up against it, but a terrific game of football. It was a real finals contest. Both teams pushing it either way. You have the disallowed goal for Auckland, the ball that we still don't have a definitive camera angle of whether it passed out for a goal kick before it was headed in at the far post that would have made it 2-2 late on in the tie. It was ruled out by the assistant referee, who, to be fair, was in the exact right spot to see it. So I personally choose to put my faith in him. But it was a really great game, really tense. Bruno Fornaroli comes in, spending a lot of season on the bench, and he scores his goal at the crucial moment. Daniel Arzani showed up in a big game. Josh Rawlins comes in after not playing a lot of football. They have to switch up their formation to a 3 at the back because Casey Boss and Adama Traore, their 2 left backs, are out injured. And they adapted really well. And that has to go down to Arthur Dillis and his management after coming into a tough point after not winning in their first 6 games when he was appointed 7 or 8 rounds in after Patrick Kusnorbo left. And then on the flip side, real disappointment for Auckland. They've been clearly the best team all season, but they come into their first finals match at home and their second overall. And it just, we talked about them all season being a team that was so consistent that it was always going to be favouring them for the premiership. But when it comes to the championship, winning the final series, you have to show up in 90 minutes. And they did that in Melbourne. They didn't do that to the same extent. It's not like they played badly in Auckland either. The first goal from Zinedine Mishash was a complete fluky deflection that it was in a scenario where they're probably okay with him being in that much space a little bit far away from the goal, but they just get lucky and all of a sudden the pressure is on. So it's unfortunate for them. They've had an exceptional season, but it's a brutal lesson in finals football that not anything is deserved.
Yeah, I think we certainly need to doff our caps to Auckland and the season they've put in. It's interesting. Steve Corica seems to think that he was in a better position than that assistant referee on that goal and that it should have been awarded. What a surprise that he sits on the opposite side to you, Lachie. But yeah, I find it an interesting take that you seem to be of the opinion that this game would have just played out as 2-0 irrespective of whether Melbourne Victory came in at 1-0 down or not.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying if this game played out the way it did and we started at 0-0, it still would have been just as entertaining.
Well, it would have been on 90 minutes, yes, but we could have been in a very different situation. I'm still campaigning, as I believe you still are, that 2-leg semi-finals are not the solution here, and neither of us are arguing that. I just love the irony that it is your team that comes through in the second leg, and now we have an all Melbourne grand final. We'll touch on the other leg. It was this one was a fait accompli at 3-0. Melbourne City just did enough, I suppose, Lachie, to take a 1-1 draw and make sure they headed in with some momentum, but Western United were never really in the hunt of turning that deficit around.
No, they looked all right for 20 minutes. They were a bit under the pump, but they held firm, and as soon as Ispaich, who you can see there in the graphic, scored the goal, then it was over from there. You could see head drops. Noah Botic, who of course didn't start the first leg due to a slight injury complaint. Obviously, hindsight is 2020. Wouldn't have been good to have him involved for 90 minutes in the first leg, but they ran the risk of having it blow out and not being able to make an impact in the second leg. He got his goal, but it wasn't enough to claw back 3. So it's a brutal roll of the dice, really. They took a gamble and it just didn't pay off. So very unfortunate for Western, but this was Melbourne City's tie. They won a close tussle. The 3-0 was probably unfair to Western in the first leg, but getting themselves into that position. They were never going to let it fall away. They were clearly switched on from the out. Melbourne City, they knew they didn't have to go and score too many goals, but they were still playing football. There were a couple of individual moments where you could see players were getting frustrated. The likes of Aziz Beige, Nathaniel Atkinson, who made his return from injury, making sure his teammates were switched on and they weren't going to let anything jeopardise this lead. And they didn't. They took a 1-1 draw on the night and a convincing win on aggregate into the grand final. And as you say, it sets up a Melbourne derby, the first of the likes that we've seen in the A-League men's competition for a grand final. So super, super exciting. Amy Park has not got many seats free already as we sit here on a Tuesday. So that'll be packed out by the weekend, I guarantee it. And it's going to be a very special atmosphere for the game on Saturday.
Yeah, I look forward to being able to recap what is an enthralling game on Saturday. And I think if I'm not mistaken, there's no NRL in Melbourne this weekend, and there's very little AFL, so it's almost
not on Saturday at all for those two codes. So free air,
which is a very rare thing. It's you'd love to say it's good planning, but we know that doesn't happen in Australian sport, and that's not just a football thing. Just ask the South Australian Cricket Association. It's an enthralling one. It's great that we've got this rivalry. Melbourne City head in as slightly warm favourites, based on the dominant display probably in that first leg and the fact they haven't had to travel. But on paper, there's not a lot between these two sides, Lachie. This is going to be an absolute cracker, and we know that both teams, when they're at their peaks and they come together for these derbies, they sort of grow that proverbial extra leg. They're going to be right up for this because not only is it grand final bragging rights, it's local bragging rights as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a massive, massive game, and it's one that kind of snuck up on us because when we saw the finals bracket, no one was expecting Auckland to not be in this grand final. The fact that they got to go straight to a two-legged affair, you'd think that their consistency over two legs would probably just get them over the line, but that's not the case. So all of a sudden, we've got this surprise result in the grand final, and it's such a significant one, being the first Melbourne derby, and two teams that play some really entertaining football at times. Melbourne City, I think the key to this game is if you're playing it with zero fans in the stand, then Melbourne City win the game more often than not. They play the better, more rounded football for me. Everyone knows their role. They have just those extra little bits of quality in every single position. Maybe not compared to the Victory in attack, but just player for player, they're very, very good compared to the other teams in the league. But Victory, as we saw on Saturday night, they show up in big moments. In a Melbourne derby plus a grand final, they're going to have most of the supporters. We know this. That is a big, big moment. So all of a sudden you add in the theatre, the drama around it, a little bit of the football gets devalued in the overall equation of who wins a game like this. And all of a sudden you spit out the formula and Victory look quite close to Melbourne City in terms of expectations. So it's going to be a really tight tussle. As much as Melbourne City finished 3 places above Victory in the league, Victory haven't lost a derby this year. They've absolutely throttled City in the first 45 minutes of the opener in round 2, and then they drew the remaining 2 games as well. And for City, the stretch goes back, I think, 7 games, including that elimination final defeat last year to the Victory since they've won a derby. Aurelio Vidmar was part of all that. Of course, he has a history back at Adelaide United when he coached in a losing grand final to Melbourne Victory as well. So there's so much at play here. You've got the other coach, Arthur Dillis, who was an assistant coach a few months ago, and all of a sudden he's coaching Melbourne Victory, a pro football team, in an A-League grand final. So there's so many great storylines. Everyone really cares. Victory haven't won a trophy in a little while. Melbourne City have won lots of premierships but haven't really got the championships to boot. They're 1-4 in the last few years going into this one in grand final. So there's so much anticipation. It's going to be a cracking game.
Certainly is, and these two sides hold some phenomenal records when you look at the numbers of grand finals they've played. And as you said, Melbourne Victory now 4 wins. And if you pull out these two teams, you can't go more than a season without grand finals across the last 11. One of these two has been in at least every second grand final. We've only had 1 or 2 grand finals in that period that one of these teams hasn't featured in. Melbourne City have been in 4 of the last 5, and Melbourne Victory, obviously the runners-up last year. So they will break a drought. It's been 3 years since we've had a Melbourne winner when Melbourne City won their first title in 2021. So it'll actually be 4 years when we get to that point. So we'll wait with bated breath. Lachie, we know where your allegiances lie on the navy blue side of this battle. I think I'm going to have to go on the sky blue side just due to my English ties and Manchester City. So we might be pitted up against. One of us can get bragging rights. But look, the one thing I'm going to ask for you, I'm going to put you on the spot here and go either way. We'll go with the typical piece of the the medal going to the Joe Marsden medal going to the winning team. As either side, if they win, who take the Joe Marsden medal?
Either side. Okay, good question. I think in a grand final, you're looking at the big moments and you're looking straight ahead to the goal scorers and who's going to be the last touch of the ball to go in the net to provide the difference. It's a big moment. I'm going to go out on a limb. Daniel Arzani, he rarely pulls two good games together in a row. He did have a good performance against Auckland, but it's a grand final. These are the kind of moments where you get out of bed and things just click for a player like him. So on the victory side, I'll say Daniel Arzani. For Melbourne City, it has to be Marco Tilio. He's been the best player for mine in the competition in the last 6 weeks or so. He's had an extraordinary run into this grand final. He's probably going to be looking to score some goals as well. So the two young Socceroo wingers for me, Daniel Arzani and Marco Tilio. Yeah,
I don't mind that. I think they will be right up there when it comes time. There's certainly a number of other goal scorers on both sides, but I'm going to go for an enthralling game that goes to penalties and goes the way of a goalkeeper instead. So one of the two goalkeepers to take it out. That'd be a nice story because, as you said, it's always in these big games. It's always those people up front that, do the highlight reel stuff, but the goalkeepers are the unappreciated, unsung heroes of our game a lot of the time, unless you're a grey wiggle.
Absolutely. I'm going to push you here, though, because there's kind of three options for goalkeepers that could win this medal. Who are you actually going for?
Look, I'm going to lean to Beach to take it out because of who I've tipped to win, so...
All right. But obviously the story is on Melbourne victory. Mitch Langerak has been out injured for a couple of weeks. Jake Duncan has been absolutely superb, but it's clear that Mitch Langerak is the favourite. Is he fit for the weekend? He could be. It's been week by week for a couple of weeks now. So does he come in for a one-off game? Jack Duncan, as I said, I think has been extraordinary. So I wouldn't be taking him out, but there is a possibility that Mitch Langerak could be between the sticks as well.
One of those heartbreaking stories. I think we see it every year with the AFL, don't we? Where there's someone that misses out, but, there's always a late inclusion and someone drops out, and it's always the story of what could have been or what would have been. So, again, Jack Duncan is a former Jet. I would certainly feel for him, and it would be a phenomenal story because, he signed on at the start of this year at Melbourne Victory, full well knowing come mid-season that he's likely to be the number 2 keeper, right? So what a phenomenal story. Imagine if he came in and made some spectacular saves or... do we see Arthur Dillis go, all Socceroos mode and goes to that penalty shootout that I predicted and Jack Duncan comes on and grey wiggles this? What a story that could be.
Yeah, what a story. I don't know what the penalty records are like for those two keepers. It'd be interesting to see. Mitch Langerak actually saved one a couple of weeks ago, I think. So, maybe he is the favourite if he's not fit, come on for the shootout.
That could be interesting. Anyway, watch and see. The team selections will be an interesting piece. And also because as we're recording, the Dolan Warren medal is not finalised. So we'll recap those next week when we recap the grand final as well. Certainly looking forward to this, Lachie. 7:40 on Saturday. It is the place to be if you're in Melbourne. Get the last of those tickets. If you're not in Melbourne, then tune on in. You can watch it free to air on Channel 10. Of course, you can watch it on Paramount Plus as well. But Lachie, Avil, as always, if people want more in-depth across the football landscape, there's plenty of content coming out at Roundball Australia at the moment as we get to the peak of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. A-League Grand Final, and then we're straight into Socceroos with a very, very important window as well with World Cup qualification on the line.
There's lots happening. Check it all out at Roundball Australia. Until next week, Lachie, Avil, a big thank you.
Cheers, Chris.
Well, it's been a little punchier than normal, but we've hit the big notes, some big topics across your sporting landscape this week, including a Blues Origin win, which was great to see as a New South Welshman. We're certainly looking forward to how the Origin series pans out. We know you never write off those Queenslanders. But a big thank you to Lachie Avil and to Matt Willoughby, and of course, to a man on the ones and twos, J.R. Carter, getting all the magic done, both behind the scenes and when it comes to motorsport. Maybe not so much on his cameos on surfing, but that's okay. Of course, you can stay tuned to us during the week across your social media channels. You can keep up to date at The Chris Mack Show on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on TikTok. And at the moment, we are dropping some extra episodes around our YouTube and some extra content on TikTok around the French Open. So stay tuned, give it a like, make sure you're sharing that around as well. Let us know what your thoughts are in both the comments on here and on our social media. And we'd love to hear what you'd like to hear more of. But until next week, we will continue to be your home of your black and white on sports. No grey opinions here. We look forward to talking sport with you again in 7 days.